Well, today we have one of the key turning points in Christianity. Of course, this is coming from the Acts of the Apostles, and we are following the Acts of the Apostles the entire Easter season because that's what the first reading is through the entire Easter season. By the way, that's every year. Do keep in mind that there are 2 cycles of daily readings, and there are 3 cycles of Sunday readings. So your Sunday readings change every year on a 3-year cycle, A, B, and C. Your weekly readings change every year on a 2-year cycle, 1 and 2. And by the way, odd years you have 1, even years you have 2. So the cycle this year obviously is 2. And so that's the way it works. So there's all different readings. But Easter, it's the same reading every year because the first reading is because you follow the one book that is the Acts of the Apostles every single year. So this is the way it goes. Now, one of the many reasons why I want to be careful what I say. I don't want to, I know there are many people that want to go back to the Latin Mass and the whole bit, and they want to go back to what is actually called the John the 23rd Mass, standing for Pope John the 23rd, who was the Pope in the early 60s. But for about 5 years, he was Pope. Someone once said, I always get a kick out of it, he's supposed to be a transitional Pope. I said, how do you know if someone's a transitional Pope? And they go, they select him as Pope when he's older, so he's not going to last very long. Ah, gotcha. So in any case, as you can see, John the 23rd was only alive after he was named Pope for about 5 years. And then you went into Paul VI, and then you went to John Paul I, who was not supposed to be a transitional Pope, but ended up being one because he only lasted a month. He was the William Henry Harrison of popes. And then, of course, you had John Paul II. But so you had this transitional pope who the last manifestation of the Latin Mass was the John the 23rd Mass. Well, in any case, a lot of people want to go back to that, but this is why the focus is always on the Eucharist, because the focus at that Mass was the Eucharist. So the liturgy, the readings were downplayed for 2 reasons. One, everything but the gospel was in Latin, so if you didn't understand Latin, you wouldn't understand them. You would have a book that was in front of you, that was a missal that would have the English translations, but of course that's different. And also, so everything in the Mass, everything was in Latin. And people were praying the rosary or doing some kind of devotion during Mass because you didn't have to participate in Mass. So that was that whole thing. Well, now we have a major emphasis on the readings and the Eucharist. And so we have the 2 cycles. So today we're looking at, every year we have this, the reading of the conversion of St. Paul. So at this point, he's actually Saul, so he isn't Paul yet, but he's on his way. He's practically the fire-breathing monster. He's out to get all these members of the new way, this heretical sect in his mind, that he's going to bring them all and end the sect. And on the way, he is on the road to Damascus. That's where this saying comes from. And Jesus appears to him. What happens is this bright light appears, knocks him off his horse, and then Jesus appears to him and says, "Why are you persecuting me?" Let me see if I can bring this up and read it to you directly. This is from the 9th chapter in Acts, and it is indeed right at the 9th chapter. It's the first verse from the 9th chapter. So let's kind of read this. Now Saul, still breathing threats and beatings against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest. So we're going to understand that he gets a warrant, and petitioned him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if found any men or woman belonging to this way, that was called the way, he would lead them as prisoners to Jerusalem. And as he made the journey, it happened that he was approaching Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven shone around him. And falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, Who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. It is hard for you to kick against the goad. I think in the modern translations, that's very different. I have no idea what that means. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what do you want me to do? And the Lord said to him, Rise up and go into the city, and there you will be told what you ought to do. Now the men who were accompanying him were standing stupefied, hearing indeed a voice, but seeing no one. Then Saul rose up from the ground, and opening his eyes, he saw nothing. So leading him by hand, they brought him into Damascus. And in that place he was without sight for 3 days, and he neither ate nor drank. Now there was a certain disciple at Damascus called Ananias. And the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias. And he said, Here I am, Lord. And the Lord said to him, Rise up and go into the street that is called Straight, and seek in the house of Judas the one named Saul of Tarsus. For behold, he is praying. And Paul saw a man named Ananias entering and imposing hands on him so that he might receive his sight. And Ananias responded, Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much harm he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. And he has authority here from the leaders of the priests to bind all who invoke your name. Then the Lord said to him, Go, for this one is an instrument chosen by me to convey my name before nations and kings and the sons of Israel. For I will reveal to him how much he must suffer on behalf of my name. And it continues. Continues for 5 more verses, but we don't have that much time. So you see, and I love that line you hear from Ananias. A modern, if there was such a one, a modern translation would be, do you know who this guy is? You want us to go find him? Are you kidding me? Do you know who this guy is? And all of a sudden, they recognize that the Lord has said he is going to use him. And ultimately, there's all kinds of things that happen. And you realize behind the scenes, the Lord is doing many powerful things. And some things seem like absolute tragic realities, and other things seem like the Lord would have no part of this, and the Lord's behind the scenes all along. So here we have Saul, who was an intense Pharisee. He literally was a Pharisee. He was of the Pharisee party. He knew the law of Moses. He knew all of this extremely well, and he's the one, and that's why he's seeking to silence the way, because this was against the law of Moses from his perspective. It's kind of interesting. Dennis Prager, who unfortunately suffered from a severe, paralyzing, literally, accident back in November. So he hasn't been around as much, but apparently he's still working. But in any case, he explained one time on his radio program that people always ask him if he's going to become a Christian. But there are certain teachings in Judaism that tell him not to be a Christian. So that's the same thing that happened with Paul. All these people are doing these miracles and doing these powerful things, and he's saying, no, I am going to seek after these people, and I'm going to bring an end to the way. And it takes Jesus himself appearing in front of him before he finally realizes that he is wrong. So all of this is used. And again, who is Saul? He's this intense Pharisee. So later, when he's up against these powerful super apostles, he calls them, he can argue with them because he knows his faith really well. It's kind of funny. I've had that experience myself, not arguing against super apostles. But obviously there are people who despise Catholicism and they use the Bible against us. And believe it or not, this is obviously before cell phones and everything else. I used to carry a Bible in my back pocket and I would read it on the John. honest, true. People thought that was blasphemous. No, I said, you're looking for something to read. If you have to be there anyway, it's a great thing to read. And I would. I literally would. So in any case, I had an argument with someone. He was trying to convince me that, Catholicism was wrong, and he was, as is usually the case, an ex-Catholic. And so he would argue with me, but remember, I know I wasn't a seminarian or a priest then, I was a sailor, but I had read a lot of the Bible because I read it on the John. And I knew it extremely well. And he would start arguing a point, and I would come back with a counterpoint. And he would say, "Oh, this is where I learned a tactic." Now, a lot of protesters and these community organizers, even though don't believe in God, they use the same tactic. He'd go, "I'm not talking about that." And I go, "Well, I am." He'd say something. "Well, Ephesians says dot 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 dot. Ephesians 5:22, pa pa pa," and I can't remember exactly what the argument. Obviously, that was well over 40 years ago. And I would say, yes, well, in Galatians, it says dot, dot, dot. And he would go, "I'm not talking about Galatians." That's the tactic. Now, if you were to argue with someone on the street about anything, they're protesting whatever, and you give them a counter argument, they will say, "I'm not talking about that." But I am, is what I would respond. It's the exact same tactic. They learned it from the evangelicals. Anyway, we're going to be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Subscribe, like. We'll be right back right after this. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and I like to talk about different subjects and work. Well, I had a powerful experience. I happen to be watching YouTube, and there's these reaction videos. Now, they're reactions to songs, but what's fascinating is they're songs that I grew up with. So now it's being rediscovered, and, as the old saying goes, it's so old it's new. And I've told you the story of a reality that I discovered songs that my parents were listening to, and I had no idea. And I was like, this is great music. You'd really like this music. And they're like, we grew up with this. And I said, are you serious? I mean, I knew it was the kind of music that they grew up with, but I didn't know it was exactly the songs. So, for example, remember, I am a veteran of radio. I'm a Navy veteran, and I'm a veteran of radio. Those are two totally separate things. I wasn't doing radio in the Navy. I'm a veteran of public radio. So in any case, I was doing a jazz show on WUMB-FM, which is that radio station has launched many a career. So anyway, I was doing a jazz show on WUMB-FM. It was actually, big band jazz. And I discovered, now obviously I knew some of the big band jazz songs, but we also used to play like Manhattan Transfer. Well, Manhattan Transfer is not from the 40s. It's actually from, at this point, it was the 80s and 90s, and I think they're still around. But they played music from the 40s. So there was Tuxedo Junction and all these other songs. So I happened to play this for my mother. I said, you'd like this music. And, I didn't know Tuxedo Junction was from the 40s. So I like, listen to Tuxedo Junction. And she's like, I grew up with that. She said, not just the style of music, the exact songs you're playing, I grew up with those. So now there is this thing on YouTube where you have these people who are different elements of whatever occupation they are, and they do reaction videos reacting to music videos of the music that I grew up with. So I was watching someone, saw a couple videos where people were watching and hearing the original music of Bridge Over Troubled Waters from Simon and Garfunkel. And they're like, what is this? This sounds cool. And all that. And it reminds me of, there used to be a radio station at a radio studio right at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross. I think that's long gone. But it used to be a radio studio at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross. And some of the parishioners, the younger parishioners, happened to find a stack of records they had there. And they had never seen them before. They had no idea what these were. And I explained to them that these were records, and this is what we call vinyl, and I explained to them how they worked and stuff. And I said, which is true, by the way, Monty Python put out a 3-sided record. And one of them said, well, I think I'd prefer the 2-sided kind. In case you didn't know that. Which I'm not recommending you listening to it. It's Monty Python. It's British humor. A lot more risque than American humor. So, I mean, I heard this back before. I think I was still in high school when I heard. No, I was in radio. I was in radio then. So I was in college. I was my early days of radio. I was in college radio then. And we heard it's big. What's her big tie and handkerchief or something? I almost said Big Bamboo, and then I realized that's Cheech and Chong, which is a whole different story. But in any case, yeah, that's a 3-sided record. On one of the sides of the record, it looks like a regular record. If you put the needle down, and remember, I'm not endorsing this record, okay? There are things there you might say, oh, well, this is back in the 70s when we were listening to British humor. If you put the needle down, it plays the side of the record. Well, you can pick the needle up, put it down again, and it plays something completely different. It's not the same thing. And eventually they figured out, well, everyone knew because they designed the record, but people were saying, how'd they do this? And there were 2 sets of grooves on that side of the record. So it's a 3-sided record, although it looks just like any other kind of record. So physically, it's a 2-sided record because you can't have a 3-sided record. But as far as the vinyl grooves go, it's 3 sides. So anyway, that's it. So I saw 2 of these reaction videos, and one of them, I because the name I remember, was Black Pegasus, who I love to listen to his reactions. If you ever check him out on YouTube, he's very good. And Black Pegasus, he actually did this 2 years ago. Black Pegasus is a rap artist. And I never thought of this. Now, I was in the Navy when the song they were listening to is The Devil Goes Down to Georgia. I was in the Navy when that came out. And there was we were in Japan. We were in Yokosuka, Japan. And there was a country band. I've talked about him on the show before. Brian Lomback and the Sounds of Country, who hated rock and roll. And I was into rock and roll. I've been in rock and roll all my life, but I'm into country now. As a matter of fact, Saturday is country day in my life. I listen to Hillbilly at Harvard from 95.3 FM, WHRB. You can also find them online, which is literally right from Harvard University, Hillbilly at Harvard. And then at night, I listen to the Grand Ole Opry. And we were very sad to learn that Don Schlitz died last week. Don Schlitz is the writer of many great country tunes, but probably the most famous is The Gambler. So anyway, they're watching Charlie Daniels' band play The Devil Goes Down to Georgia. And Black Pegasus is a rap artist. And he said, and I never thought of it this way, he says, this is rap. If you know the song, if you don't know the song, go look it up. Devil Goes Down to Georgia. And better yet, go look up Black Pegasus' version and see his too, but definitely see the original Devil Goes Down to Georgia. And definitely see those and listen to them. Listen to this great tune. This was Charlie Daniels, a real powerful country singer, really incredible guy. A whole band, good Christian too. And so the Devil Goes Down in Georgia. Well, Black Pegasus, and he's listening to this, and he's also he starts dancing in the studio because you can't help it. Listen, he starts doing the country dance. He says, "Look, I do rap. That is rap, and I never thought of that." He says, "This Charlie Daniels is doing rap," and I was like, "Wow." So it's really fascinating, and when you listen to other forms of music, even rap music. He gave some suggestions, some rap artists I'm going to check out. He says, yeah, this is kind of like them. I'm going to definitely check them out. But this is powerful stuff when you see these people reacting to this and give you a whole new view of who we are and what we're listening to, what our culture is and stuff like that. And of course, Charlie Daniels' band was a great band. The best thing he ever did, though, was that Geico commercial. I think that is the best thing he ever did, because there he is showing some guy how to play the fiddle. That's how you do it, son. And when you look at the commercial closely, you can see they're in a fancy restaurant. The guy's playing a violin. Charlie Daniels showing how to play a fiddle. That's how you do it, son. So in any case, definitely check that out. Some of these reaction videos. We're going to be back on the other side of the break, and we'll talk about what's coming up not only next week, but what's coming up tomorrow. Because it's tomorrow. Are you feeling overwhelmed, burdened by the challenges of life? Take a moment to find solace in the words of 1 Peter 5.
Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time.
In times of trial, remember the power of humility. Trust in God's timing, for he will lift you up when the time is right.
Cast all your anxiety upon him, because he cares for you.
Release your worries and anxieties unto the Lord, for he cares for you deeply. Find comfort in his loving embrace.
And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, shall himself perfect, establish, and strengthen you.
These are just a few verses from 1 Peter 5, offering you hope, encouragement, and guidance. Tune into the Bible, the source of everlasting wisdom.
Bible verses based on the American Standard Version.
Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. So anyway, Hallow, the Hallow app, and Formed are two apps that have on their platforms something called Chime Travelers. And what it is, it's an adventure series for youth where it has some of these characters, these young characters. It's an animated series meeting saints. And among them is like St. Patrick, St. Francis. You got to check it out. Chime Travelers from Formed and from Hallowed. Tomorrow, Lisa Hendy, who is the original author of the series, it was originally a series of books, will be with us to talk about this new animated series coming to us from Family Theater Productions, which is the production arm of Holy Cross Family Ministries. So that was Father Peyton's organization. That's the organization that he created. So we're going to be talking to Lisa Hendy tomorrow all about Chime Travelers. Tune us in, and then we'll be back on Monday.
Yeah. You know the real is back. Father Carr Chaplain from the city of champions, dropping daily reflections coming straight from the field. The raw truth revealed for the strong-willed. It's the Greatest Act of Defiance podcast with your host Father Carr, a message built to last. The Greatest Act of Defiance podcast. That's right, the Greatest Act of Defiance. Word up. Word up. Word up.
The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.